Okay, now this is the beginning of Chapter 8, and we're talking about how to classify not only assets, but how to classify cost associated with assets. And if a cost associated with an asset were to, and there are two ways of doing that. One would be at revenue or expensed out, or if you thought that the benefit that you are adding to the asset would last over a year, you would call it a capital expenditure, which means you would end up depreciating it along with the asset. Now, I know that sounds a little bit confusing, but bear with me and I'll show you. You'll see some examples here. So, if the cost only benefits the current period, okay, it's a revenue expenditure. If it's like an ordinary repair or maintenance, like changing your oil, maybe filling up the antifreeze, things of that nature, that's a repair. So that's just a what we call an expense, and you expense it out. You write it off or put it into the income statement as an expense immediately. So, and what you would end up doing is debiting repairs expense or maintenance expense and crediting however you paid for it, be it a credit card, be it accounts payable, or directly out of cash. On the other hand, if the money or the value that you're adding to the asset will last over a year, that becomes what they call a capital expenditure or a capital cost, and you would add that to the base of that asset. So if it lasts longer than a year, then it would become depreciable. So that means that you would add it to the value of that asset, such as a car. If you put a brand new engine in it because the engine was going bad, that's going to make the life of that car longer. So instead of being depreciated out for maybe 5 years, it would be depreciated out for 7 years. So you're adding to the value, and that value will extend the life considerably of the asset, and that's called a capital expenditure. And you're going to debit the fixed asset and debit accumulated depreciation. And we'll do some examples of this. Typically, you would adjust the depreciation and revise it for that vehicle. But right now, all I want you to do is understand the difference between the two. So, here are some examples. What if I change the oil? Well, I'm extending the life of it, but only for, 3 months? Because then I have to change it again. So that becomes a revenue expenditure, or something we cost out right away. If we install a television in a sleeping compartment of a truck, what does that do? Is that a revenue? Does that extend the life of the truck? They call it a capital because it's going to stay with the truck and it will be used over a period of time, over that year's worth of time, and also add to the value of the truck. If I install a wind deflector on top of the cab to increase fuel mileage, they're going to call that a capital expenditure because it affects the vehicle for the length of the period, and it increases its value. So that becomes a part of the vehicle. So it's a capital expenditure. We modified the factory installed turbocharger with a special order kit designed to add 50 more horsepower to the engine performance. So what do you think that might be? Right, that's a capital expenditure. How about if I replace a headlight? How long is that headlight going to last? Probably going to expense it out right away. So I replace a shock absorber. What do you think? That's probably going to be expensed out. That's a normal type repair that you would have. A hydraulic brake system? That's, a repair. You're not really adding anything to it except for increasing the safety of using it. So, replace the fog. Again, I skipped one. I replaced the fog and cab light bulbs. Now, if I'd put new lights on it and increased the value of it, I would probably capitalize that. There's a difference. Here's a hydraulic brake, and then I removed the OCB and replaced it with a newer model. They're saying that would be a capital because it has a greater range and it will stay with the vehicle. And then I replaced an old radar detector with a newer model. And it's got a built-in safety feature, so they're saying that's adding to the value. Think of it as features on a car. If what you add adds to the feature of a car and would increase its value, then it's a capital expenditure. So that is how to differentiate between revenue and capital expenses. And I'll stop at that one, and then we'll go on with the rest of them.